Well, first of all, thank you so much for everybody of you coming to this emergency summit to Jerusalem. I was just sharing a few moments ago with the speakers this week that this gathering, it is a miracle. We were sitting together maybe half a year ago when we decided we will have that summit. It was in our mind already some time earlier, but we were not sure if there was a war. There was not a war. There was a war again. One of the comedians said there was a war within a war that was taking place. And we were not sure, can we have this gathering? And then we decided, yeah, let's have it. And it was, I think, half a year ago when most of the speakers got their invitation to come. And I was telling Nick, you know, if half of them will agree to come, this would be a huge success. I am very delighted to tell you every single one of the speakers said, yes, we are coming. Give them a big applause and hand that they made themselves spontaneously available. And for me, this is a sign that God is in that meeting. That this is not something that the ICEJ ordained, but that God really orchestrated that meeting and brought us together from all over the world. And we called it an emergency meeting because it is a state of emergency in many different levels. Number one, of course, we will hear about that this week. Antisemitism is growing like crazy since October 7. We have never seen such a dramatic rise of anti-Semitism since the last 2-3 years. 500% in some of the countries in Europe. In American universities, anti-Semitic attacks increased 500%, unbelievable. All over the country in the US, it's 200%. And I was just AIing the last few days about those numbers, and they said in May only in the US, anti-Semitic attacks increased eightfold, 800% to the previous month. And if you talk about European number, it's even worse than the United States. We are living in a time of emergency. We need to act now. That's why when people came to me, Jürgen, let's postpone that meeting. Maybe next year is a better time. I said, no, we need to act now. We need to come together and we need to hold that meeting. Then the second emergency, or it's connected to that, is that anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism is actually penetrating the conservative circles of Christianity and of the whole world. People like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, they're just the tip of the iceberg of what we are seeing. There are countless voices out on the internet today that speak out of a conservative background against Israel. And the sad thing about that is most pastors, most leaders around the church, they are silent. And they're not silent because they are anti-Semites or they are against the Jewish people. I believe most of them, from the bottom of their heart, they have some warm feelings towards the Jews at least. But I believe it's blatant ignorance and illiteracy by most pastors about Israel. They don't dare to speak. Some of our branch leaders, they tell us, thanks so much for coming because you are touching a subject that I cannot do anymore. That means they are afraid and they bow down to the pressure of the world. What concerns me very much, and this is something that we have been discussing here at the ICJ over the last few weeks in particular. You know, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he keeps saying evangelical Christians are Israel's best friend. The General Secretary, the new General Secretary of the World Evangelical Alliance, the overarching body of the evangelical movement around the world, is a Palestinian Christian. His name is Boutros Mansour. He's not living far away from here in Nazareth. He is not known for his pro-Israel stand, but has a lot to say about a pro-Palestinian standing and identity. When he was introduced at the Seoul Convention, when he was elected, he didn't say, I'm an Israeli Christian, I'm a Palestinian Christian, he said. He just appointed recently, as I have to get the title correct, the senior communication officer of the World Evangelical Alliance, a gentleman called Daoud Kutab, a Jordanian journalist that is known over the last couple of years for his anti-Israel rhetoric, criticizing Israel for not taking care of Christian communities, criticizing Israel in any possibility, and he speaks today as senior representative of the World Evangelical Alliance. They have a flagship publication dealing with theological matters. It's called the Evangelical Review of Theology. And let me quote you from the last article in the latest issue. It's titled, Christ is the owner of Haaretz. And you already can guess in which direction that is going. In the concluding paragraph, he writes, if we adopt this type of theology, saying that Christ is the owner of Haaretz, it will help Muslims to hear Christians promote Christ as owner of the land rather than suggest that a natural Jewish inheritance exists. It says, in order to please Muslims, let us deny their inheritance and let's just say Christ is the owner of the Holy Land. That's the main magazine of the World Evangelical Alliance today. It's an emergency situation we are in today. Also, there are new forms of replacement theology around the world, not those dating back 1700 years ago, even though they are the roots of that. But they are called the New Pauline Perspective, and it's in many ways a brilliant thought about highlighting the Jewishness of Jesus and of Paul and putting them in a Jewish context. But then they say, if we look at Israel today, it has no relevance anymore regarding the Word of God. And we will deal with that at this summit. And then, of course, we are living in a unique historical time of Christianity. We heard it, we are 1700 years after Nicaea. Now Nicaea, and we will speak a lot about that on this summit, is the main watershed, I believe, where the separation between the Jewish people and the church was cemented and solidified for the centuries that followed. And we are reaping the fruits of that even until today. And we will speak about that, and we will address those issues. I'm very happy to tell you that this gathering here today, it actually originated out of a daily prayer meeting, the global prayer gathering. Every Monday we were gathering to pray for the healing of the breach of Nicaea. And one of the participants, one of the intercessors, some of you know her, Christine Tarek, I wish she could be here with us. She said, we need a summit in Jerusalem. That's why we are here today. And we are addressing those issues. And I'm very happy that people over the last year prayed every single day for this gathering. And then we are living in a very unique time of history. I want to formulate it like that. We are perhaps the very first generation that needs to deal theologically with the existence of a Jewish state. You might say, well, Israel is already there 80 years. Why should we, or almost 80 years, why should we be the first? I remember when I was a kid, our father, I see my brother Gottfried here, he was a pastor, and Israel theology at the time basically existed in 3 short sentences. The Jews are back in their land. Therefore, second, we live in the end of the end days. Israel was the dial in God's end time clock. And how many of you remember? It was 5 to 12. Sometimes it was moving on 3 to 12, 2 to 12. I'm not sure what time we are in right now, but that was the time counting back then, 30, 40 years ago. And then the church will be raptured. That was the third assumption. And then, of course, Israel will be dealt with very harshly by God. And the church is watching from heaven. And then somehow it will be a new glorified Israel that will welcome the Messiah and the church back on earth. We are now 80 years after the foundation of the state of Israel. And Israel is not a nation anymore that struggles for survival. It's a striving, successful nation, a superpower in the Middle East. Latest after October 7, Israel established itself as an element, as a factor in this region that nobody denies that it has a right to exist and nobody believes it can be annihilated. Israel makes peace today with the Middle East countries. Israel is today a leader in science, in research, and technology, and we better get our heads around that. How do we deal theologically with such a successful state? And that's why we are here at this summit. And finally, I'm very excited to tell you, at least by the grace of God, and if the Lord will tarry, and if He gives us the strength to do it, therefore this will not be the last Jerusalem summit. It will be just the first one of many. Why? Because the emergency situation will not go away after this summit. Next week, we will face the same giants that we see today. Secondly, theology will not change from today to tomorrow. It's usually a very long process. That's why we need to meet again and again and again and again. And the rift between Israel and the church will not be supernaturally be healed after this summit, but it will leave us a lot of work to bring this reconciliation and bringing those two sides together. And then also many issues of Israel still need to be discussed in the future. We can't deal with all of them right now at that summit. What is Israel's legal right? What does the Bible say about the land of Israel? What does the Bible say about the Jewish people returning back to their homeland? Many questions that need to be answered by the church, and that's why we need to meet again and again. I was opening my Bible this morning in my Bible reading, and it was open to 2 Kings chapter 13, where Elisha is meeting the king of Israel. And he said, "Strike the ground." And he struck it 3 times. And Elisha gets frustrated. He said, "Oh, would you have struck 5, 6 times? It would have been a complete victory." And I felt God affirm to me the thought, we need to strike again and again and again and again and again until we win the battle, until we win the gates back in our countries. I want to thank all the speakers to come and to make themselves available during that time. I think they need a big applause for coming here to make that summit possible. And Nick, how much time do I have left? Because I now have forgot to switch on the timer. Are you sure? Please pray for me. I want to give a few words at the end about the nature of our conflict here, what we are dealing with in those coming days. Now, there's a famous passage in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, and the seer apostle John, he sees 2 images. The first one, he sees a woman that is pregnant, that is crying out in her pain to bring forth a male child, it is said. And then you have a second image followed immediately after that. You see a enormous red dragon with 7 heads, with 7 diadems, with 10 horns. And he's there to devour the male child that is being delivered by the woman. And then we hear that the male child is being born, the dragon tries to kill it, but then it's snatched away into the heavenly places. Now, who are those protagonists? I think the dragon is the easiest to explain, because if you go to verse 9 of that same chapter, it explains it very well with many different names. He calls it the devil, the serpent, that ancient serpent, Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. There's no doubt who that is. You don't need to be a theologian. It's Satan himself who is there. Who is the woman? Now, there are many arguments about that. History said it might be the church, it might be Mary herself bringing forth the male child. But actually, there's only one, for me, satisfactory parallel that you find in the Bible that has the same imagery of the sun and the moon and the 12 stars that is surrounding them. And that's the story in Genesis chapter 37 of Joseph's dream, where he sees his brothers as 11 stars, him being the 12, his parents as sun and the moon. And what I believe, what we see here is Israel represented as the generation of the fathers and the following descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. And we see the dragon trying to kill that male child. The male child, of course, is the Messiah. It's described as the one who's going to rule the nations with a rod of iron. It says it was literally snatched away from him and was ascending to heaven. And I just can imagine on that day when Yeshua was crucified, that all hell was celebrating and dancing. Mission accomplished, we have him. The male child is being dealt with. We frustrated the purposes of God here on earth. But I also would like to have a sneak peek on what happened on the third day, when suddenly the stone was rolled away and Yeshua rose up from the dead, and then 40 days later he was ascending up to heaven. Now I want you to pause here. Satan realized he couldn't accomplish his mission. If you would be Satan, what would be your next mission? Yeshua came here on this earth. His main mission was to establish a church. If you would be Satan, I would go against the church. That's the second best target for me. Revelation chapter 12, verse 13, it says, when he was thrown out of heaven, he didn't persecute the church, but he persecuted the woman. Isn't that interesting? Only later on, in the very last verse of that chapter, he says, well, he couldn't get the woman. Then he went against those who have the testimony of Jesus, the church. Isn't it amazing that Satan apparently even hates the Jewish people more than he hates us Christians? It's no wonder in the Middle East you hear that phrase, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. And why is that so? I believe Satan understood more about Israel than many theologians understand today. Satan understands that God is not finished yet with the Jewish people. He understands that there is still a mission laying ahead for them in the future. I believe he understands exactly what Paul means in Romans chapter 11, verse 12 and 15, where Paul says, he says, even in their falling and even if in their unbelief, salvation came to the nations. And then Paul says, how much more will the blessing be in their fullness? In verse 15, he says, it will be like life from the dead. Paul understood that the restoration of Israel, not only a physical but a spiritual restoration, will actually shadow everything that was happening before. He said, how much more the blessing will be when they will be fully restored. And Satan understands that if he can kill and destroy the Jewish people, he can frustrate the purposes of God even until today. And I believe that explains where we see this relentless hatred. Like President Herzog just said a few moments ago, it's the most ancient hatred in history. Why? Because Satan hates that people. Now, the nature of that conflict, very briefly, it's quite interesting. You know, I was sharing that on Monday with our prayer gathering yesterday. And if you go to chapter 13, where he attacks the church, those who have the testimony of Jesus, Satan uses in a way proxy agents to accomplish his target. You see the rise of a beast, you see the rise of a false prophet. Both of them, it says, the dragon was giving them his power. So he relents, or he gives his power to other agents to attack the church. But when it comes to the Jewish people, it's Satan himself who does it. And I believe it explains this incredible hatred that we see today on the streets all around the world. It's a demonic spirit that drives those people to shout from the river to the sea. Give a big hand to my son Simon here. Thanks so much. In Germany, there is a word, it's called Chefsache. I'm not sure if you understand this in Yiddish. It's a matter of the boss. When it comes to the Jewish people, Israel is the Chefsache, the matter of the boss. Satan takes himself care of that. Isn't that interesting? Secondly, we see here a multi-headed beast. The English journalist Douglas Murray, he recently said, anti-Semitism is a shapeshifter. It has many different heads. It can have the head of a jihadist in Gaza. It can be the head of a Columbia professor in the United States. It can have the head of a German intellectual during the Nazi time. It can be the head of a well-spoken politician. Nothing against the Jews, but it can be an international institution like UNRWA. It can be artists, musicians like Roger Waters, or theologians during the time of the Third Reich, for example. If you look at the Wannsee Conference, most of the people were members of churches, some of them even theologians. It is a shapeshifter. It can appear in many forms and in many different variants, and that's what we are facing today. It's a demonic spirit. And then finally we read that out of his mouth, verse 15, a stream was coming out. He was trying to devour the woman with a stream. And it's interesting, the book of Revelation actually writes again and again, Revelation chapter 9, this incredible beast looks like a locust and a horse, and it says his power is in his mouth. Revelation chapter 13, the beast, it's given to him a mouth to speak blasphemous thing. And then in Revelation 16, verse 13, even more powerful, you read about those demonic spirits who, like frogs, come out of the mouth of that dragon for the purpose to deceive the kings of this earth. And I believe, you know, when you look today on the streets of Europe, you see actually the dragon speaking to people. You see this water flowing out of his mouth from the river to the sea, death to the IDF, where IDF soldiers not welcome in our country. We had just a few days ago in Ireland an ICJ event. Outside people were standing. Zionists, Christian Zionists are not welcome in our city. It's the dragon speaking. And there is a supernatural power behind it. I remember my mother telling me, she was growing up during the Third Reich. And she says, whenever we listen to Hitler's radio, the Volksempfänger, whenever he spoke, she says we might not have agreed with what he said, but it was something like a magnet that pulled us to that radio, that made us to listen to him. And I believe the same magnet you see today with anti-Semitism. The good news about that is, and here I'm finished, it says, but there are those who overcome. And we are gathered here at the summit to overcome that beast. And they did so by the blood of the Lamb. What is that for me? For the first, as the first point, it is through the blood of Yeshua that we can approach the heavenly realm. And I have to tell you, I have to recognize we maybe made a little bit of mistake in the way how we organized it at the summit. We should have allowed more space for prayer, because this battle is being won. Robert, you were relating to that, in prayer and on our knees. Secondly, by the mouth of their testimony, the word of their testimony. We are going to learn this week truth about Israel, biblical teaching about Israel, and we want to bring it out to all the churches all around the world. I invite you, share the content of this week on your platforms, communicate it with your people in your denominations and churches where you are coming from. And thirdly, it was an attitude that they didn't love their life until death. One of the speakers told me today, he says, I was actually thinking if I should come here. I heard the news about the missiles in Israel. Something in my heart told me to come here, but I was afraid. And at the end, I entered that airplane. I was flying to Israel. And he said, when I entered here, the land of Israel, something supernatural happened. I felt the peace of God coming over me, and I knew I'm at the right place. He was an overcomer. And God invites us to overcome that beast with our access to heaven. Number two, with the truth that we speak about this week. And thirdly, with an attitude for a sacrificial love for the Jewish people. God bless us in that.